Greetings and welcome to Modern Gnostic. My name is Brian Stanford, coming at you this morning from Asheville, North Carolina. If you hear rumbling carts in the background, I'm sitting outside work, getting ready to go in, but it's just so beautiful. I wanted to shoot a video outside. And it's been a while since I've made a video, about 3 weeks, and so I wanted to kind of explain my absence. I find that having been on the spiritual path for many, many years, I hesitate sometimes to talk about the difficulties that I go through because I feel like, as someone who's been practicing for well over half his life at this point, that a lot of the difficulties that I experience, maybe I shouldn't be experiencing them. Maybe meditation and prayer and practice and ritual should have gotten me to a point to where this is not occurring. And I'm finding more and more that actually that is not the case, and that it is some version of spiritual pride that keeps me from discussing these matters. Recently, I've been re-examining the Tarot and Kabbalah in my personal studies. I think I discovered Tarot and Kabbalah back when I was about 14 years old, and have made, over the last 30 years, maybe 4 or 5 concerted efforts to study the system and to integrate it and make it part of my being and my life. And each time previous to this point, each time I would have said that I had failed. But I think now that what has actually been occurring is that it's been a slow process of integrating this model into my being. And I find that on my return to it now, at the age of 47, a lot of things that I learned along the way are falling into place in a way in which they didn't previously. And recently, one of the, realizations that I've been coming to, and it's not original to me, it's something that people talk about in regards to Kabbalah, is that it's not that we simply ascend up the paths and then stay at that level of realization. So for example, I feel that about 2 years ago, I had maybe a quintessential Tippereth type experience, an experience of the resurrected God, a Christ experience. Sorry for that sound of grocery carts scattering across the parking lot. I had this experience. I think in Buddhism they talk about it as stream entry, or the initial stages of liberation. And upon having this experience, much existential pain and crisis seemed to be conquered fully and for all time. But what I've learned is that we, at least I, tend to go up and down the tree, and that these processes of liberation and awakening are ones that continue on higher arcs or spirals. And lately I have found myself cast down back onto the other side of the gulf between the lower kind of common everyday small s self and the higher capital S self. And in Kabbalah this is sometimes talked about as personality versus individuality, and personality being that aspect of ourselves that we typically walk around with in the day-to-day, and the individuality being the higher aspects of capital S self. Something else that I've found is that the existential pain and crisis that seem to be overcome in the first initial awakening up to capital S self or individuality, when I fall back below that gulf, the suffering is way more intense than maybe it previously was, or perhaps it just seems that way because it's occurring now. So I feel like I've been in that place below the gulf for a couple of months now, and really, really struggling with existence. Which isn't to say that a lot of good things haven't been going on. We're making great progress with the Gnostic Church here in Asheville. I love where I live, my friends, my partner. But somehow all of these things can still fall short of that ultimate satisfaction that the soul really cries out for. And it's one of the things I've talked about in previous videos with the Gnostic urge, that no matter how good conditions might appear to be for us in the material world, there is still that sense of suffering that is there, that sense of unfulfillment that perhaps the soul will always feel in our separated place between ourselves and God. But this morning, as I was studying Kabbalah and Tarot, I came across some really interesting readings that I wanted to share in this video. And these readings, the first one I'm going to read is a quote from The Dark Night of the Soul by St. John of the Cross. And this is a classic esoteric Christian text explaining this place of being below the gulf and striving for that higher capital S self, the integration of individuality into personality. Indeed, the death of the personality to the greater birth of the individuality. And so St. John of the Cross says, "Although this happy night brings darkness to the spirit, it does so only to give it light in everything, and that although it humbles it and makes it miserable, it does so only to exalt it and to raise it up. And although it impoverishes it and empties it of all natural affection and attachment, it does so only that it may enable it to stretch forward divinely, and thus to have fruition and experience all things, both above and below." And then there's a commentary in the book I'm reading right now, which is a great book called The Kabbalistic Tarot, a textbook of mystical philosophy by Robert Wang. And this is a beautiful book. Not only is it beautifully put together, it's a nice hardbound textbook, but it is just full of gems of Hermetic philosophy. And Robert Wang has a commentary on this quote I just read, and the commentary says, "There develops, in fact, a dreadful emptiness, almost a complete disinterest in everything, even concerning whether one lives or dies. Life's processes cease to hold value. Yet with this feeling one pushes ahead, almost mechanically, but with great faith. The soul moves forward inch by inch, in an indescribable blackness, the dark night, the putrefaction, in the belief, and not always so sure, that the light will eventually appear to lead the way." I think that this is a key part to understanding the path through the dark night of the soul, and particularly the path from the perspective of esoteric Christianity or Gnostic Christianity. And this is the component of faith. And right now, that is the place that I am standing. I'm standing below the gulf, or maybe in the middle of it, but holding out with faith that what is occurring is this alchemical process of putrefaction, of death, of decomposing, of the dying off of all the accretions of the material world, of the small self, of emotional pain, karmic baggage, various hurts from family, from past history, the trauma of life that we all experience. And the path is a prayer that all of this will be burnt up, that we will, as warriors, boldly face the incredible pain of the fires that burn off all of this flesh and leave behind the essential skeleton of the true self, the capital S self, the individuality, the Christ within, the spark of the divine. We hold out in faith that despite the deep darkness of pain and depression and dryness that comes as part of a genuine spiritual path, that this is a process of transformation. And we are told in the teachings of the Hermetic Kabbalah that it is only this faith that can get us across this gulf. The only way across the gulf between the small self and the capital S self, the true self, the only way across that gulf is a leap of faith. We leap out not knowing not knowing if it'll work, not knowing if there'll be an end to the suffering, not knowing if we can trudge on another day. But we plant our flag in faith and we move forward. And we allow ourselves to die and to be burnt up and to be consumed. This is an essential part of the Western spiritual path. And it is said in many places. Gareth Knight is one of the people who talks about this. Dion Fortune, another powerful woman in the Western esoteric tradition, who talks about this. That the path of the Western esoteric tradition is 24 hours a day. It's not just the path of morning meditation. It's not the path of retiring to the monastery. It's the path of the warrior of the night. It's the path of 24 hours a day, waking up, doing your practice, doing your study, going to your job, even if you hate it, dealing with all the trudgeries and day-to-day banalities of life, dealing with all the joys and blessings and richness of life. Seeing all of this as the path of inner alchemy, of transformation, of turning base metals, the lead of our small self, into the gold of who and what we truly are. I hope you find something in this video that inspires you. If you find yourself going through this period of the dark night, if you find yourself cycling through it again and again, plant your flag in faith. Take up the sword of the night and leap into the gulf. Leap into the gulf. And as always, I leave you with the blessing that the Holy Spirit may take you from light, from darkness into light, from ignorance into knowledge, and from death into immortality. Until next time.